Have you guys ever heard of zebra mussels? If you haven't, the zebra mussel is a small shellfish native to Eastern European waterways. Its name comes from the dark zigzag stripes on each shell. They are notorious for being one of the most prominent invasive species in the world. Despite originating from Eastern Europe, they have colonized many foreign bodies of water such as the Great Lakes. While mussels do make a delicious meal, these variants aren't very friendly to our appetites nor to our ecosystems. Due to their foreign origin, zebra mussels lack natural predators in other environments, which allows their colonies to spread rapidly across lakes and oceans. Zebra mussels also prefer hard surfaces to attach to, which includes the shells of native species such as mollusks and even crayfish. Zebra mussels filter out contaminants from the surrounding water, which may sound good on paper, but the filtering process removes necessary nutrients to native species, and it promotes eutrophication, or algae blooms, in the bodies of water they inhabit. In addition to this, millions of dollars are spent on power plants to remove zebra mussels from clogged water intakes. These environmental problems are all due to these small mollusks being shipped to and dumped in numerous foreign countries.
Zebra mussels are an example of an invasive species, which is a species that is not native to the ecosystem it resides in and may cause harm to that ecosystem. This is often seen when a non-native organism outcompetes a native one to the point where it endangers the native one. According to the National Wildlife Federation, species that grow and reproduce quickly and spread aggressively with potential to cause harm are given the label invasive. Invasive species have always been a natural phenomenon, but in recent years, humans have accelerated and amplified their spread to the point where they can cause severe social, economic, and environmental damage. So how did humans allow this to happen? Well, humans have always used plants and animals for a variety of purposes. We've used many different types of plants and animals as income or food sources and as pets. When these species are brought to new environments, they can escape or be released into the native environment. This is what is currently happening with Burmese pythons, which are a common type of pet snake. Many of these pythons have been released into the Everglades, a swampy marsh in southern Florida. These pythons are native to Southeast Asia and have very few natural predators in Florida, where they can feed on birds and other native wildlife without worrying about competition or predators. But this is just one example. In recent years, human globalization has led to an increase in international trade and travel. While this benefits humans in a variety of ways, one can argue that it poses a serious risk for allowing the spread of invasive species. With an increase in maritime travel comes the potential for water transmission of organisms in the ballast tanks of cargo ships or on the propellers of smaller boats. The zebra mussels we mentioned at the start of this video spread that way. Additionally, crates and other forms of storage allow insects and other small animals to potentially travel across countries or entire continents. Humans, whether intentionally or unintentionally, have allowed the spread of non-native species around the world, which can lead to irreversible harm if nothing is done to stop their spread. Fortunately, there are ways to deal with invasive species, but there isn't one solution that works for every species. A common method for dealing with invasive species is to eradicate it from the affected area. In the US, this is how we deal with species like garlic mustard and lionfish. Garlic mustard, an invasive plant in the northeast and midwestern United States, can be stopped simply by cutting the organism out of the ground along with its roots and replacing it with a native species. Meanwhile, lionfish, an invasive fish in the Atlantic Ocean, are often hunted by the US Coast Guard in order to keep their population under control. Another method is to try and introduce another species or use chemicals to control the spread of the original invasive species. The Australian government used this method to stop the spread of prickly pear cactus by introducing cactus moth caterpillars, which are a natural predator of the cactus. While this method works, it is entirely possible that the newly introduced species or chemicals can harm native plants and animals as well. To see other ways that the National Wildlife Federation combats invasive species, you can look at this article on their website.
Not all non-native species are invasive. Most of the crops grown in the United States, including wheat, tomatoes, and rice, are not native to the US. To be invasive, a species must adapt to the new area easily, it must reproduce quickly, and it must harm property, the economy, or the native plants and animals of the region. And when we hear the term invasive, we often turn to evil and invaders and seek to eradicate them immediately. However, not every invasive species is an uncontrollable threat to the environment. One of the most beloved animals, horses, are actually an invasive species in North America. Brought to the continent in the 16th century during the Spanish conquest, horses were later domesticated by Americans. Normally, they would tear down crops and fight other animals for their natural territories, but they are utilized for transportation and settlement within the United States. Another invasive species that has proven itself to be essential to the environment is the honeybee. We all know they pollinate our plants so the plants can reproduce and keep on living, but we don't know that they actually arrived in North America from Europe in the 1600s. The bees are dwindling due to colony collapse disorder, but unlike other invasive species, they have benefited the environment to the point where we are trying to keep them alive.
Invasive species have proven quite troublesome to native ecosystems and human trading, and interaction with foreign species has dramatically increased the rate at which these species become invasive. Whether it be the Burmese pythons in the Everglades or zebra mussels in the Great Lakes, an invasive species' ability to reproduce with little to no threat from predators creates extreme competition for the native species' survival. There are ways to fight the spread of invasive species and to protect the world's ecosystems from falling apart. This can be done by having humans eliminate the species or using foreign predators to prey on the species. However, these methods can indeed backfire, such as accidentally destroying native species in the process or introducing another invasive species to the area. Now that you get the gist of the threat of invasive species and the possible ways such species can be dealt with, take a look at this TED Talk that provides an animated explanation of the topic. You can also check out this activity on Zooniverse called Invader ID, which shows you how to identify potential invasive aquatic species.
Civilization has led to an introduction of invasive species in different ecosystems, which endangers the species living in those areas. Zebra mussels, for example, originate from Eastern Europe and live in fresh water. They attach themselves to hard surfaces underwater, such as boats and water-related equipment, which enables them to be introduced to non-native habitats. Zebra mussels can harm the environment by attaching to other man-made structures such as pipelines, hindering the movement of water through turbines and structures used for the intake of water. They can also clog water filtration pipes and filter necessary nutrients for native species. They have no predators and are harmful to foreign ecosystems in which they are introduced to. Common methods employed to prevent this damage from happening include introducing a new organism or chemical to control the growth of the invasive species, or capturing all invasive species organisms in that ecosystem. It's important to understand how these species are introduced as well as what damage they can cause, so that we can appropriately deal with them and preserve our natural environment.